the more intelligent the questions will be. So I was very, very happy that my staff, Symra, taking the lead to, engage the DEC. And I know that they are very happy to be part of this discussion. I thank them for their responsiveness to this community. And of course, Ginsburg Development that is very interested in making sure, again, that what they do, the community is aware of and knows that they are going to be responsible as this project ensues. So they were obviously very, very willing to be engaged in the conversation as well. So again, thank you, Eileen. Thank you, Ludlow community, for your leadership, your diligence, and your commitment to making sure we are all accountable. And with that being said, I guess I know there's different segments to this, but Symra, I guess you were going to introduce the DEC person, or maybe not. I don't know.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Symra, you have to unmute there.
That would be helpful that if I to unmute. Yes, I'd like to first of all thank the DEC staff with a quick turnaround in their response. I'd like to thank Wendy Rosenbach, who helped me put this together on the DEC side. And I'd like to introduce some of the staff that are here this evening. John Spellman, the DEC project manager. I don't know if Katie McNamara, she was invited, Director, DEC Legislative Affairs. Stephanie Mosey, DEC Region 3 Communications Person. And Amen, he's allowing me to say and call him Amen. He's the DEC Division of Environmental Remediation. And then of course, Wendy Rosenbach. And I would like to call upon John Spellman to give us an overview of DEC's role in this remediation. John? Oh, John, where are you? John is in two places. John, can you hear us?
I think he's muted, maybe.
Yeah,
He was on.
He's in two
He's
places.
on.
He's on?
He's muted. I'm not sure I can get him.
He's reconnecting.
Oh, he's reconnecting. Okay.
Oh,
Actually, he's on just on the phone on one line, and he's been connecting to audio for a long time. So I think his intention was to speak on the phone, but he hasn't unmuted, and I have tried to ask him to unmute, but I haven't successfully.
Maybe you try and find him, and maybe Eileen or someone wants to say a few words, and maybe GDC starts talking.
Yeah.
so, I mean, Ruth, why don't you just do a little intro, and then because Ruth is the point person for our group, and it was the best person.
Yeah,
Well.
I'm not sure if Lucy is on, but Lucy Moreno, Casanova Moreno, sorry, and I were both appointed community liaisons by the county, the city council members who represent the districts that are affected by the larger Ludlow community plan. And the Downing Street project is smack in the middle. So, we've been working with GDC and the city office all along regarding various aspects of the project, focusing on rezoning and what the GDC projects were going to be like. So, and the community has been very involved. We were aware of the work, the fact that the soils, we have long-standing industrial use, but we have not been very connected with this DEC project. And I know there is supposed to be citizen participation, so we're hoping we can be hooked in at this point. So tonight, as Symra already indicated, we had asked if DEC could give an overview of the process and what has brought us to this stage and just what this stage is, and focus on what is being done to assure that the neighborhood, the surrounding community is protected. And then GDC, we've asked Jim and Andy, and I don't know if there's anyone else, Chris, I think, is from GDC, to talk about what their proposal is that is before the DEC.
I would just add that Dr. Fuad Dahan is here with us from SESI Engineering, who is the chief engineer for the cleanup on the job too, and we could consult.
Okay. Thank you.
I tried calling in. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes.
Now we
Yes, we
can.
can.
I don't know if you wanted to continue with your plan B, or you want me to speak a little here. Let me know.
Well,
I think you're plan A.
basically, yeah, we're turning it over to your team. I don't know if you have someone else on your team that would, or now that we can hear you, you can speak. We just wanted to get an overview of the process that has brought the project to this point, and what is being done to ensure the neighborhood, surrounding neighbors are being protected from whatever the remediation needs to be done.
Okay. Well, let me back up, maybe even back up a little too far, but much of this site was a former MGP. And if you don't know what an MGP is, you're normal, because MGPs went extinct in the 1950s. MGPs are manufactured gas plants, and they were local businesses that made a combustible gas from coal around the turn of the 20th century. And the gas was used for street lighting and cooking. It was a wonderful thing because before the street lamps and the stoves, people went out with lamps and had to shovel stove ashes. So everyone liked these MGPs at the time. They were very common. There were about 250 in New York State. So there's nothing unusual about Ludlow. In the 1950s, interstate pipelines were installed that delivered natural gas. And they were the death knell for the MGPs. They just couldn't compete. So there's no more MGPs. You might wonder why the environmental field knows about manufactured gas plants or MGPs. And it's because if you think of a pack of cigarettes, they have so many milligrams of tar. Well, by a similar process in the gasification, MGPs have tar, only they had railroad cars amounts of coal, which equate to gallons of tar. And being that it was the early 1900s with no environmental rules, the tar was often disposed on site, and the tar contains hazardous substances such as benzene, naphthalene, benzoate, pyrene. Currently, nearly all the MGP cleanups are being done by large utility companies, National Grid, Orange and Rockland, Consolidated Edison, and these utility companies were successors to the local MGP businesses. So if there's no questions, I'll continue on with the cleanup process.
Mm-hmm.
There's 4 phases to the cleanup process. First phase or step is a study or investigation of the site to find out what's there and where is the contamination. How is it in the soil, the groundwater, soil vapor, any surface water nearby? Second phase is a look at the cleanup alternatives for that contamination selection. Which works best, which is most efficient? Would it be a soil removal or a solidification process, or perhaps an oxidation chemical treatment type process that's most effective? And once there's a selection of the cleanup, the third phase is an implementation of that cleanup. And then following implementation of the cleanup with construction crews generally, there's a long-term monitoring or restrictions placed as the fourth and final phase, unless the cleanup is complete, and then there's no need for a long-term monitoring or restriction program. Sometimes there's a partial cleanup done in the middle of the process. That's known as an interim measure, an interim remedial measure. At the Ludlow site, the site is in the investigation phase, so there's still quite a ways to go. Initially, the Ludlow site was studied by Consolidated Edison, and then the site entered the Brownfield program in 2018 with additional property, an additional study by the volunteer, which is Ludlow Point Development. I think we're referring to Ludlow Point Development as Ginsberg, and
Correct.
you can correct me on that if I'm not seeing that right.
You're
Okay,
correct.
great. Con Edison found that much of the contamination was located in or near the former MGP structures, which are in the central to the south portion of these properties. So just in qualitative terms, the heavier contamination in the soil is in the center or south, with a lighter contamination found by SESI and the volunteer Ginsberg up into the north. Ludlow Point Development is proposing an IRM interim measure in the north near the Boyle Memorial Park, and then the south would be addressed later.
Jim, did you want to share your screen, or you're not able to share your screen? John, I mean, sorry.
I'm not able to share a screen. I'm sorry, I don't have any presentations for you.
Okay.
Possible SESI has something they can put out a little later when I'm done. Maybe that would be helpful.
That's fine. Okay.
Department's public involvement has included requests for comment on the Brownfield application and the investigation work plan. In addition, there's a sign posted at the gate with my contact information. I don't know if that sign is still there. It was at one point. And I know, Ruth, you had requested a summary of the investigation in layman's terms, so I haven't forgotten about that. And you're probably wondering, well, geez, why haven't we heard about it? And I'd say the reason is the investigation was delayed due to an inability to access property for a while. But that's no longer the
John,
case. The investigation.
Chris Lynch from Ginsberg. Yes, the sign is there with your name on it. I believe there's a phone number as of about a month ago. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay, great. Okay, no, and that phone number is my direct line. By the way, I know a lot of DC people don't like to give out their direct line, but that's there, so you won't get any runaround. Ask for respect when people use that number. It's going right to me. So investigations are winding up. There's still some DEC questions outstanding, but I think once we get a little further in investigation, we'll try to address the association's questions and give you some more detail as to what we've found out there. So let me get into the IRM proposal. As I read it, I haven't heard it orally from SESI, so it'll be good for me tonight to hear from them as well as you. So the proposal is currently out for public comment, and I just want to mention that all work is done to a pre-approved DEC plan. Plan is essentially a soil removal of about 25,000 cubic yards. To give you a sense of that, a truckload is about 20 cubic yards, so we'll be looking at about 1,000, 1,200 trucks, plus trucks arriving for backfill. Now, I don't envision someone looking out the window and seeing 100 trucks out their window one day. The trucking is usually limited daily to the excavation rate and disposal facility allowance. So there won't be convoys, and there's no truck queuing allowed. It won't be like the thruway rest stop. Trucks at a time, and they're radioed in for load up. The excavation depth being proposed is about 23 feet. It could be deeper, but that's a fairly deep hole. Groundwater in that hole would be collected and treated. Following removal, there would be a backfill to grade with approved non-contaminated soil. The objective of the IRM is to allow all future type living and activities, what we describe as an unrestricted use in the IRM area, as allowed by the zoning. This does not require land restrictions or long-term monitoring. And during the IRM construction, DEC provides an on-site presence during the work. It would be full to part-time, depending on availability and the critical nature of the work. There's air monitoring at all times while the soil is disturbed, the shutdown job action level, and it would include dust and odor monitoring. Trucks must be DEC permitted, covered, and washed prior to leaving the site. Roadway must be kept clean. And after the IRM is complete, Ginsburg would address the remainder of the site for evaluating cleanup alternatives. It would be fall work being anticipated for the IRM. That's about all I have for you. I can try to take some questions, or if you want to move on to.
Yes, there's a couple of questions. Ruth, do you want me to take that or do you want to do this?
Go ahead.
Okay, so Geraldine Canty asked, what is an expedited cleanup specifically?
I think that's just I don't think that's ever really been described. I think I interpret expedited cleanup as just wanting to get ahead of cleaning up the rest of the site. And I believe Ginsburg wants to be able to develop a portion of the site. I think that's a question that we have for them during this comment period. The department wants to know whether a piece of the site is going to be carved out and then move into development ahead of the rest of the site. Maybe
Yeah, that was
Andy
that was my question. You said most of the really contaminated areas were central and south, but the cleanup's going to start in the north. So why start where it's cleanest, I guess, and or what's the rationale for that?
I think, and I'd like to hear from Ginsburg on that. I think the rationale for that is to advance unrestricted use cleanup in a portion of the north property of the site so that apartments can be constructed.
Yes, if I could just add to that as well, the north property was always intended to be the first development site along the Boyle Park. And the southern property that includes the southern end of the Downing Street site, plus the Westchester Metal Works and the 151 Ludlow building are phase 2. In the original plan that we presented, both the phase 1 building and the phase 2 building look very similar. However, that building transversed Knoll Street, and we've learned since about some utilities under there that would make it difficult to transverse. So we're going to need to go ahead and revisit the southern phase of the project by not building over Knoll Street, but within, it doesn't change the zoning or the secret envelope that gets approved. It's just we have to go back and rethink how we want to handle the southern phase, and that will be a separate planning board approval once we figure that out, and we'll go through the full process at that time. When we submit to the planning board this fall, we're going to be submitting the plan for the north building as we always intended to. That will also include the Bridge Street extension and Promenade Park so people can access it. But the southern portions where most of the Con Ed issue is something that would be more in phase 2. when Ceci talks, there's some other things we're going to be removing as well that are not related to the Con Ed. And we'll get into that as well. So there's still a lot of removal to do, a lot of soils to take out on the north end to bring the site to the grades that it needs to be, so we can eventually line up with Bridge Street to the south, with Downing to the north. So there's a lot of that soil is going to be clean. So some of the trucks that leave will be contaminated and they'll go to one place, and some of them that will leave will be clean and they'll go to a different place. So Ceci can get into more of that later, but that's why we need to do the first phase 1 to the north first. Thank you.
Sherry asked, or Ruth asked, what makes it an interim remediation plan?
It's called interim because there hasn't been a remedy selection done. That's in the second phase of the project. Typically, and I would expect this as well, that the department comes out with what's called a decision document, literally, and it defines how the cleanup is to occur. And that's put out for public comment as well.
Yeah, if I may add to what John just said too, DC has a policy whereby we can allow a portion of the site, of a site, to be cleaned up if we have sufficient information that that portion of the site can be cleaned up in a safe manner without impacting the community, as well as the other areas of the site that hasn't been, that has not been addressed. So we've done this at several sites, and this is a common thing that we do as part of our program.
Does that answer your question? Okay, Sherry asked, during the cleanup process, what will be done to remediate rodents and other vermin?
We don't specifically look at rodents and vermin.
But our construction management team does, and one of the first things we'll do is go in there and address that issue. That's very typical for when we start work at a site.
Yeah, I would just add that this is not the first time we've developed in a city, and obviously we develop in tight quarters, as we did it with Rivertides and Warburton, surrounded by 2 or 3 other developments. And we do a pre-construction survey with I'm blanking on the name now, but for with pest control, and then we do during the removal, we have our pest control people there to monitor the situation. But that's a valid question, and we do examine that at the top of as we are breaking ground, just prior to breaking ground, and then remain during the process.
Let's see, Ruth asked again, what will the southern cleanup be complete before the northern building is occupied?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Will the southern cleanup be complete before the northern building is occupied?
Probably not. But shortly thereafter, it may begin before the building is fully occupied, but probably not complete when we begin to lease the northern building.
And Northrop asked, to what depth will the site be excavated? If I heard 23 feet.
That sounds correct.
23 feet is what's on the current
23
plan,
yeah.
but there's pre-design borings that will take place. May alter, as well as confirmatory samples that may require a deeper excavation to achieve the unrestricted use.
Okay. So my question, so you drill down and get to a point where the soil is clean, but what if you hit groundwater first? Do you keep going beyond the groundwater and deeper? How does that work?
Yes, groundwater doesn't enter into the equation when it comes to the soil removal and determining unrestricted use. The groundwater is simply pumped out to facilitate its removal, but it's not a determiner as to whether the soil meets unrestricted use or not. The sampling can be done underneath the groundwater.
Say that last thing again. You don't sample beneath the groundwater? Is that what you said?
When they start removing the dirt.
I would
sorry.
envision that as you're excavating, the groundwater is being pumped out. So the excavation looks fairly dry. And then when SESI feels they're at the bottom of the excavation, they will take a sample. If that sample is unrestricted, meets the unrestricted use criteria. And if not, the excavation would continue to a deeper depth.
Okay. So I imagine groundwater as like an underwater river of sorts. How do you pump and get to the end of that? How much do you pump?
Pumps are placed within the excavation with hoses, and then it typically goes to a tank. Then from there, it goes into a treatment system. And from there, it can either go into a stream under department approval, or it can go into the municipal sanitary sewer system through a county or municipality approval. And I think it's going to be the latter for this project. So it's pumped out, I think, is your answer.
Right. If I may add to what John just said too, I think one thing that they can employ while they're doing the excavation is to isolate the area of excavation, whereby that will limit the amount of water that will be entering the immediate excavated area or excavation area. So I understand what you're saying with regards to, I mean, is it going to be like a pool? I mean, is the water beneath the surface going to be like a pool whereby you have to try to dig through that pool? That will not be the case. I mean, they will try to limit the extent of infiltration into the excavation area that will allow them to pump the limited amount of water that will be in the excavation area.
I could put a little bit of an experience here, doing a lot of those excavation in the groundwater, right? I mean, groundwater, it flows in the deep surface, but its flow is very, very slow because it's going into very porous media. And if you take the soil out, whatever is left in water, after you squeeze the soil out, right, whatever is left in water is very little. So if we're excavating and dewatering, usually the dewatering goes a lot faster than the soil removal because you're removing a lot more soil than water, right? This is the nature of the thing, is that if you have, like, you know, a cube of soil and you've put water in it, there is a lot more soil than there is water. So during the excavation, the watering will go a lot faster than removal.
Okay.
Maybe
Lots
Just
more
for
questions here?
reference,
I know there are a couple more questions, but should we maybe switch? Some of them are getting into questions that probably GDC is better equipped to answer anyway. And then
Maybe
we'll open
ask,
up to any questions.
Maybe ask Greenies, and then.
Yeah,
out
okay.
there. So how will the volatile organic compounds be prevented from reaching residents? I understand that these can be very dangerous to health. And maybe a second part to that is what sorts of, what are you monitoring the air for? And how do you protect the neighbors from that?
We are monitoring the air for organics. volatile organic compounds. There are levels set of concentrations of these organics in the air. They can either slow down the work or stop the work depending on the level, and also depending on how close or proximity the excavation is to an occupied building. In addition to organic compounds, dust is also monitored with shutdown action levels or intermediate levels where there would be a water spray or a limiting of the excavation to reduce dust.
And
That's the
So-
full question, Eileen?
yeah, what, can you just, so if something is in the air today, how soon do you get alerted to that? How quickly is that? Are you notified?
Well, we're not expecting air volatiles in the air today. There could be exacerbated upon the disturbance of the soil, the excavating of the soil, or the loading into trucks.
Mhm.
John, I could add a little bit on this. Recently now, what we installed, we do rent equipment that is connected to a cell phone. It will have a cell phone chip in it that will give us, if that we set it, we program it for exceedances that are regulated by the DEC, right? If there are any exceedances of the VOC levels, the safe VOC levels, or the dust, it's real time sends us warning that we exceeded the dust monitoring levels, and we act on it in real time, right? So we are on the site, SCSI. We will have a representative on the site that he or she will be getting those warnings on their cell phone, and the project manager from SCSI will be getting it on their computer, an email, and a cell phone. They will be getting it. And in real time, we will do the measures that John explained. We'll either stop the work, water, or ask the contractor to water the site, or do certain mitigation measures to stop those exceedances or those issues, basically.
And is that
How long do
information?
they, how long does this stuff stay in the air, the organic compounds? I mean, the dust we can see, but I'm more concerned about these carcinogenic and combustible fumes from liquids that apparently gasify at fairly low temperatures.
Yeah, I heard the question. I'm thinking through here. There's a continuous or constant monitoring, and typically once there's an exceedance level and the excavation is either covered up or the soil pile is covered up or the excavation stops, the dust and VOC subside.
Okay, so, or did I see your question? Ruth, why don't you bring us forward a little bit and then maybe get back to what you just asked them.
Okay, my internet seems to be unstable tonight, it says. I've never seen that message before. So any questions that aren't addressed, we'll have more questions at the end, but I think that since we're now talking, many of the questions are about what GDC's plan is, how to handle this. Let's turn it over to Andy. I'm not sure who, or Jim, who is the right person to turn to, but if you could talk about your plan and the precautions that you're taking.
So I will pass it to Jim in a second, but I just wanted to make mention of the fact that the holy grail of the Brownfields cleanup program is what, and John Spellman can echo this, for the developer is the certificate of completion. That means we have, that means our plans have been approved and the easements, with the environmental easements for the future will be in place, and we're going to proceed. We've done this twice before at 2 other sites. So we've done this in Rockland County and in Ossining, Westchester County. And so it's, I guess, we feel we have one of the best engineers in the brownfields business with Fuad Dahan, who was just responding. He's the SESI engineer. And we're very confident that we will have a successful conclusion to all of these matters. And in that manner, I have to say, our interests are clearly aligned. And so having said that, I just want, let Jim talk about the timing and the staging. But as I said, we've accomplished this twice previously. So go ahead, Jim.
Thanks, Andy. I also would just like to echo that even though GDC has done this twice, it is not unusual for any development in waterfront urban areas to need to do brownfield cleanups. They're quite common. The number of them were done along the Yonkers waterfront development. As Andy said, we did them at Havenstraw, which was former brickyards and other uses, and Ossining. We didn't have to do it at Rivertides because there was never an industrial use there. But as you do projects to try to reclaim, fallow industrial spaces and make them mixed use, this is a necessary part of the process. DEC allows different levels of a cleanup. And as was mentioned, we're going for the non-restricted use, which is the highest level of cleanup, which is the best. And in terms of timing, once the site plan is submitted to the city after the zoning is adopted, we expect several months before the planning board reviewing the site plan application for what we're going to build. But I do want to alert everyone that you don't need site plan approval to clean dirt. So that's a separate process that you're a part of tonight with DEC. So our intention is that when DEC gives us a green light and said this plan is good to go, we would move on site and start to clean it. Because again, it's not required of a site plan approval because it has nothing to do with what we're going to build. The other thing I'd just like to mention, I know that they said St. Peter's wanted to be here. It is going to be a lot of trucks, but they're going to be spread out. There aren't going to be convoys. But we did agree with St. Peter's that we would fund Yonkers City crossing guards at their school, which they currently don't have, to add an added measure of safety during our period of construction when we're down in Ludlow, which will be over a period of several years. So we agreed to do that, and we'll do that just to prepare an added level of safety. And the school is aware of that. In terms of the technical, in terms of what we're planning on doing, I would turn that over to Ceci or Chris, since he's our key person on that at GDC.
So Fuad, if you want to begin describing the process, or Chris.
Fuad, why don't you start and then I'll interject as we move it along.
Sure, absolutely. So a lot of what I'm going to say is going to echo what John Spellman from the DEC has said, basically. So, so the Ludlow development is a large site. GDC decided to start on the northern side, where we have some slightly contaminated soils, and those soils will be excavated. The excavation process is similar to any construction project, except that this, because it's a brownfield cleanup project, brownfield cleanup program, or the brownfield cleanup site, there are added safety measures that are added to it, which are what we call collectively we call it the CAMP, or Community Air Monitoring Program, that monitors for soil and dust. The close attention to making sure. So in addition to the air, making sure that nothing is being transported by the air, one of our main requirements from the DEC and us as engineers, I mean, honestly, to keep our license, we may want to make sure on every project is that we follow the requirements and the regulations set forward by the DEC and the DOH, Department of Health. So one of the requirements is making sure that no sediments or soil during construction is dragged off-site. This is done through controls, tracking pads on the egress and entrance of the site. You know, having a street sweeping in place if needed. The other safety measures that we take, the truck routes, we follow the truck routes that have the least impact on the community, least impact of the community in traffic noise and air emissions from the trucks, right? So, and then we go to a certain depth, whatever we determined from the investigation that John had mentioned, to make sure that all the soil contamination has been removed. And then we collect post-ex sampling to confirm that this contamination or this soil, whatever soil is left in ground, is clean soil, basically. Once we collect our post-excavation sampling, this means our remediation is completed. And then if we encounter water during our excavation, which in this excavation, it's most likely it's not going to happen because the identified required excavation for the building, for the proposed building is have some deep foundation. And for the remediation, they're a few feet above water. But again, we may encounter water when it rains. Usually the water that we encounter in the excavation is pumped out to facilitate the excavation. This is what we call dewatering. And then it is treated, or if it's not too much water, small quantities of water, we'll just put it in what we call frac tanks, and the frac tanks are shipped off-site for treatment and disposal. So this is, in brief, you know, Chris, if you have anything to add, please go ahead.
Yeah, the frac tanks are large. They're often red. They're often provided by Adler. You've seen them on many job sites, and it's used to capture the water and collect sediment and contaminated material before the water is disposed of. And then the trucks are taken away and you bring in a new one, the frac tanks.
So maybe this would be a good time to ask the question Nortra did about, you know, do you have access to old maps? Where's the question? Have historical maps been consulted to determine underground streams that have existed in the location in the past?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Fuad, but that was part of our phase 1 study of the environmental assessment review. And it requires a review of old maps, including the Sanborn maps, which were some of the first maps in the area. And Fuad, we did review all of those during the phase 1. Do you want to discuss that?
Sure. So we review in addition to the Sanborn, and we also review the historical, what we call aerial, and the historical, you know, photos. We also have the geological maps of the area, right? And I don't think, I mean, all we've seen is that the area has looked like this geologically, basically, or geographically, basically. It looked similar to what we have here, except that was like some changes in the grade, some fill was put in or removed, and the MGP, the manufacturing gas plant that John has mentioned before, I don't recall seeing any streams going through the area, maybe way before. I mean, the maps that we review are limited to when we started taking aerials and the Sanborn started, which is early 1900, late 1800s. So up to those 1800, from 1800 till now, I don't recall seeing any stream or rivers going through the property.
Thank you, Fuad.
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt if you had more to talk about there.
Nope,
Nope. Nope, we're good.
Okay. Hey, Ruth?
Sorry, I'm not sure if I heard everything, but I know Sherry had a question about what roads you'd be using to remove contaminated soil from the two areas.
Well, let me take that. So we
Sure.
haven't yet finalized that, but the truck traffic plan will be something that we study closely, keeping in mind, you know, the neighboring, the school, and obviously we're likely to be doing this during school hours, and, you know, which way we bring the trucks in, whether it's bringing them in on Ludlow, have a stacking, take, you know, the queuing of the trucks so that, you know, they don't back up, and then where do they exit from? We haven't yet determined that, but that's something we give a lot of consideration to. That we try to spread it out, come in on, let's say, come in on Ludlow, out on Downing, or something like that. But we haven't finalized that yet. But that's
So
part.
when you finalize that, is that something we'll have the opportunity to hear about before you do it? Or do we just have to see where the trucks go?
As always, we'll brief you in advance. GDC throughout this process has tried to, keep you informed and been transparent. We know that's an identifiable issue. And as soon as we work it out, you'll be one of the first to know.
Okay, but it's not actually part of the DEC process. That's something you would be doing as part of your good neighbor approach.
I don't know, Fuad, are the truck routes contained in the DEC process documents?
They are.
Okay.
We usually include them in this IRM, but the DEC requirement, and John, correct me if I'm wrong here, is to use the shortest truck route in the community to get to a highway. And once you have your soil broker in place, the soil brokers are the people who handle the disposal of the soil, or the soil management company in place, and we determine where the trucks are going. We will come up with a truck route, or we design a truck route that is the shortest to get you to a highway, then from the highway to its destination.
Right. It's not so much about, Fry, you are correct about that, but it's not so much about what would be the shortest way. I think what DC will be most interested in is to ensure that you have the least impact to the community. So that's what will be the driving force here. So what we've done at several other sites is we can at some point, we can, depending on the location, we can limit how much truck can move on a certain day, and what time of the day, and what sort of work has to be done at a particular time. So the idea is that what DC looks for is to ensure that we don't have, that whatever you're doing doesn't cause too much impact to the community.
And how will the trucks be covered?
So the
Excellent.
truck, I could answer this, Chris, if you want. So the trucks, they usually come, all the tandem trucks, they would have a built-in cover that is rolled on before the truck. Once the truck is loaded with the soil, it's a tarp that is rolled on the truck. It's DOT requirement, and it's per the DOT regulations, basically.
Yeah, it's an automatic cover that comes on the truck as
Yeah.
it's pulling out.
So it's pretty much sealed. Things don't go flying off as you speed up. So
Correct.
vision, yeah, okay.
It's not sealed, but it's good enough cover that it will prevent any from the wind. It will prevent the particulate flying with the wind. Again, it's DOT requirement. If they drive off the highway with, they get written up by the DOT.
A couple other questions there. How many VOC stations will there be?
There will be 3 actually, 2 on each side of the site, upwind and downwind, to determine, because we put 1 upwind and 1 downwind to determine if there's coming, just to determine the difference if the site is contributing any VOCs to the wind that is leaving the site. And usually our engineer will have a VOC with them to monitor the breathing air for the workers as well.
Geraldine said, can you load the trucks in the old salt pit on Knowles and drive on Bridge to Ludlow, thus avoiding the school altogether?
Can we load the trucks? The trucks are loaded next to the contaminants. So when the contaminants are picked up, they're put in the truck, and the trucks are loaded, and then the how it exits the community hasn't yet been established, but this is going to be discussed earlier. It'll be a way that provides the least amount of impact to the surrounding neighborhood.
And as Chris said, because the trucks are loaded near where the contamination is being dug up,
That makes sense, yeah.
at some point, we will be loading them up down at that location when we're digging near there.
Okay, the others, tarps covered, VOH.
Just John here mentioned a couple things add on. There was a question about the number of monitors, and I wanted to say that Department of Health reviews the location and the number of monitors. So it's possible what Fuad said could change. It's still open for comment. But the general idea of an upwind and then downwind monitoring being adequate, correct? Secondly, on the truck covers, the department does not allow mesh covers. Sometimes you see an open pore sieve type mesh over a truck, and that's not allowed. It has to be a solid type tarpaulin. Thanks.
Any other questions? The chat here. Go ahead, Bruce.
So I have a question. I'm keeping my video off because my connection isn't very stable. So the timing is GDC is waiting for DEC approval, and you're hoping that is coming this month, and you want
not
to do
August.
Oh, okay.
Chris, I mean, if Chris and Fuad want to comment on that, what our timeline is at this point, which obviously are always subject to change, but what is the timeline at this point?
If there was an approval from the DEC, it's just I'll say September. John Spellman or others may have a comment. If it was September, we'd probably have a 30, 45 day mobilization period where we we do things like the truck route plan, we do the final bids and so on and so forth. So if it was in September, maybe October, November, thereabout, but Jim and Andy will be in close contact with the community. There'll be no surprises. You'll know what's coming.
And then after it's done, then there's the determination of whether it's adequate. It's been, it's fully sealed. I'm just trying to remember, I guess, John, what you said.
John or Fuad can they'll tell you.
John, do you want to answer that? John Spellman?
Yes, SCSI would produce a report to the department summarizing the work done and the type of backfill and everything that they went through to construct the IRM, and the department would give that approval on the report. And since it's an IRM that pretty much concludes the IRM, the certificate of completion that Andy talked about, would not come until completion of the entire site. But one thing that seemed to be just tossed about was Ginsburg carving out a portion of the current site, at which point it would become separate. Perhaps at that point, development could begin. That is that how you perceive it, Andy? Do you expect to carve out a portion of the site and create a smaller site at the north?
Yeah, well, we do want to start in the north first, and depending on what the findings are for the rest of the investigation, that will determine how we proceed. But we would like to start, as Jim indicated, in the north first. Yeah.
So when I asked about whether the south decontamination would be finished before the north has occupants, that's because, you know, the people moving into the north will be closer to where the volatile chemicals, et cetera, are, than the other residents at that point. That area is for the most part not surrounded by housing,
Right.
but there will be housing once the north building is built. Is there greater concern because of the vicinity?
Maybe Chris and Fowd can clarify that. While we want to do the north side remediation first, is there going to be a pause, or is it just going to be seamless that once the north side's done, we move to the south? Because we do have work on the south that we need to do other than the buildings, such as bringing Bridge Street to grade, putting in the park. That's all on the southern part. So how does the second phase work in relationship to the first phase of the cleanup?
Chris, let me address it two parts, this question. The first concern, which is valid concern, which is the northern part is complete, the southern part still has some contamination, potentially VOC, right? Now the plan is that we will do the important remediation on the south side before the building is completed on the north side. But assuming this does not work, the building will have what we call an SSDS. So the building is planned to have a subslab depressurization system, which its role is to prevent any VOCs from making it into the building for the people who are living in it. And this is an approved remedy that is being used in several sites or new constructions. As far as the plan, like I said, the site logistics, I will leave it up to Chris. While you have people in the north and you have construction going out on the south, how the access and everything, I leave it up to Chris. But I think based on when we could submit, because the southern building, its remedy is a little bit more complex or sophisticated. This is where the majority of the contamination from the MGP is that John was talking about. So it's going to require a little bit more sophisticated remediation, not just dig and hole. Basically, this may take some time for us to design and for the DEC to approve, but we're thinking that we should have a design in front of the DEC in the next couple of weeks for them to review, and if we go over it, it's going to go up to public comment period. Hopefully, we will have an approved remedy by November of this year, and maybe by then, I don't know how again, I don't want to talk about plan or anything. I'll leave it up to Chris. But I think the plan now is that some of the remediation, or the more important remediation of the south, should be done before people move in. Chris, I don't know if I said.
Yeah, that's fine, Fuad. So if we had the approval for the remedy of the southern DNAPL and others like that was in Bridge Street, if we had that in November, we'll decide then, but we could roll into that cleanup, at that time. We'd have to see what the remedy looked like, but we're looking to move forward on the northern parcel and then perhaps, continue into the southern parcel when that's done. We have to see what the remedy looks like, but there'll be a public comment period similar to what we're doing right now.
Well, let's not get too far ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, I don't want to.
My understanding as far as the NAPO impacted area is concerned is that yes, we do have investigation report, but I don't believe, John, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe DC and DH have fully reviewed that report and make a determination whether you guys have whether the full extent of the impact has been has been investigated. So I don't see, because even if that is true, I'm not even sure whether we have a feasibility study or a remedy has been selected for that portion of the site. So saying that you have an approval for a design for that portion in November, I think that may be too optimistic.
Yeah. And I agree with you totally, Amin, and this is why I said we will have measures in place in the northern building in case there is something lingering in the south building. You're absolutely correct.
Okay. Can somebody put the link for us to send our comments in about this? I know the deadline is August 18th. If I remember that right. Somebody from the DEC, if you have that link, that would be great.
It might be best if we email people afterwards. I have the list. The only person I don't have is Sherry. I don't have an email address for you. I don't believe, but we could email it because if it's in the chat, people have to grab it pretty quickly.
Yeah, I have Sherry's email. I can send it to you.
You do? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did keep a list of everyone on this.
Okay, and then one last question, maybe. Is there a drawing or map, excuse me, of the sites to be decontaminated? Yeah, that would be great to put out with our email.
Would you like
it's in the
very
materials,
quick,
but
would you like a
finding
very
it
quick
is
summary? Sorry.
not easy. Because there's so many materials. You have to be very dedicated.
Would you like a very quick summary of where we are with the City Council and the FEIS and the Master Plan and Zoning while everyone's here?
Yeah, can I just ask before we move into that, how long is it going to take for this process for the north area? Do we have an idea? A month? 2 weeks? 6 weeks? A year?
Fuad, what do you think? 5 months for the north only?
For excavation, yeah, you're looking for 5 months.
4 or 5 months.
Yeah. This does not include, obviously, the construction of the building, right? Just the excavation.
Yeah, just the cleanup. Yeah.
And that's again because we're pacing out the removal. We don't want caravans. It's going to be a methodical process to get the bad materials out of there. With regard to where we are with the zoning and master plan, ASR, the Sugar House, and GDC reached an agreement between us about traffic issues with regard to the trucks that ASR has go down Ludlow Street. And the city that's been shared with them as well. And they shared their final comments to the FEIS, which the city and ASR have agreed to. So we do now have a FEIS finding statement that all parties agree. Previously, pretty much everyone agreed except ASR. So the changes that you'll see are basically related to traffic monitoring and the traffic improvements that the city plans to put in to help with truck turning ratios, some of it which has nothing to do with Ludlow. They go all the way back to Prospect and Riverdale to create better turning for their trucks. but that's being incorporated. So in terms of the timing, we believe the administration plans to submit it, both the finding statement and the zoning text, to the city council at their first rules committee meeting in September. They're currently on a summer break. So it will be before them at the first rules in September.
Okay.
So the
Thank you.
public doesn't get to see the finding statement until after all the other parties is basically what you're saying.
Well,
I mean,
we
I-
haven't seen it. We haven't seen it either.
Oh,
I think
okay.
what has to happen is that, I mean, we know the topics of negotiation because we were
The
involved in
city's
it.
consultant.
Yes, but the city's consultant prepared it, and Lee Elman has tried his best to do a firewall between GDC and the city, sometimes to our chagrin, but overall, I think that's a good policy. So there'll be, I think the regulations require that it has to be turned over to the city council first, and once they have it, they then can distribute it to the community. But, so I think that's how it works. It goes from the city to the council, and then the city and the council can then distribute it. And you'll all have a chance to look at it, obviously, before the vote, including us.
Okay. Just have to get that in there.
Sure, sure. Had many
Okay.
angry phone calls with Lee Elman over the last 2.5 years.
The only kind of phone calls to have.
Okay, so, Andrea, did you want to say anything to finish up or?
No, it's, oh, did Symra have something?
Uh,
I thought,
I think
heard
that's
someone.
right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, just an answer. Thank you. It's been informative, I think, for everyone. It is good that people are willing to, again, be responsive and communicative. This is obviously, I think I heard 7 years somewhere thrown out there, I guess, from the beginning of the project to the final, ribbon cutting of the building. So this is going to be a project that the more information, the more community feels that things are happening right and you're being transparent, the happier everyone will be. But again, I want to thank the DEC. I want to thank GDC, SEIS, or SESI. Sorry, I moved around your letters, and of course Ludlow for again staying on it. I commit obviously to be part of whatever conversation or whatever process is necessary in order to make sure that this thing goes again with minimum disruption to our community and maximum efficiency. So again, thank you for everybody participating, and I will just thank Symra for putting this stuff together on our end, and Eileen and Ruth, it's on you. So
Okay.
Yeah,
Wrap it
so-
up for us.
thank you, everyone. And
Yes, thank you, everybody.
Andrea, we really appreciate your attendance and interest. So thank you. And thank you, everyone from the community who has participated as well.
So Ruth, you're going to put an email together? And
Yes,
then-
I'll send it to community members. I'll probably double check with John that I have picked the right map from the materials before I send that out. Or if it's better that I check with GDC, either one. But I do remember seeing it.
Great.
Good.
All right. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everybody.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Senator. Thank you, everybody.
Yes, thanks for coming.
Thank
on.
you. Paul.
Thank you.
All right. Good night,
Thank
everybody.
you, everybody.
Right.
Thank you, Wendy.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Symra.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Symra.
Thanks, Eileen, Ruth.